Welcome to another one of Mr. Lang's vlogs. Today, we're talking about imperialism in regards to the U.S. and the Spanish-American conflict. So, let's get right into it. So first, imperialism. What is it? In the late 1800s, everyone was doing it. All these different countries were trying to expand their empires. It's basically, imperialism is when you have a country that's extending the power of one country over another, sometimes making them a colony. Not always, we're going to talk about that. But essentially, one country takes over another, and now it's part of it. Again, think about back when we talked about the American Revolution, all the way back last year. Again, the American Revolution was us, a colony, going ahead and beating back, trying to beat our way out of being part of Great Britain. Now, Great Britain was very much an imperialistic country, and even here in the 1800s, it still is. Even though we've been independent at that point. So why? Why would a country take over other countries? It seems like there's just so much of hassle. And it is kind of definitely a hassle. So the four things are as follows. First is a new place to have a market, to go ahead and sell their goods. Again, bringing it back to the British and the American colonies, again, we were told we need to buy the British tea. And of course, we all know what happened then, right? We threw it overboard. But again, that was a way to show that, yes, that was our market. That was the market of the British selling to us. We had to buy their stuff. It's also raw materials. Again, one of the best examples during this era is the French and them taking over what is today Vietnam. Back then, it was French Indochina, a colony for France. And, there they have rubber trees. Where rubber comes from. But you don't have rubber trees in France, but you have them in French Indochina. So those raw materials that are there, now the French can take it and sell that. So there's a big gain for that. So again, the need for markets and raw materials is a huge reason for them to take colonies. Another is to spread democracy. Back then, they ignorantly thought that every country that was not Christian or democratic, I'll combine the two, were barbaric. Even though these are cultures that have existed for, in some cases, thousands of years, they were not barbaric. However, they thought it was their duty to civilize these uncivilized people. And so that's where we see this whole spread democracy, spread Christianity, because they think they're doing a great thing. In reality, they're not. They're stamping out these cultures that have been around for, again, in some cases, hundreds and thousands of years. And of course, the desire for power and prestige. The more colonies you have, the more land that your empire has, the more powerful you were seen back then. So of course, when the opportunity comes, they're going to scoop up as much land as they can, even though none of it belongs to them. And probably the biggest example is the Scramble for Africa. Where, as you can see in the map here, by 1914, the outbreak of World War I, most of Africa is divvied up by these empires. It actually all started right in the Congo with the believe it or not, Belgium taking over the Congo, and from there it just was a scramble to take as much land as they could as quickly as they could. The one big one you see here, independent, is of course Ethiopia. It's a man by the name of McKinley that goes ahead and beats back the Italians, who were trying to take over and colonize Ethiopia. The Italians lost to McKinley and his army, and well, what we see is that they remain independent until, unfortunately, right before World War II, Mussolini is going to go back and invade Ethiopia, this time with tanks, and they're going to do revenge that is absolutely horrific, including bombing Red Cross hospitals on purpose. It's horrible. Now, over in Asia, a very similar situation was going on. China was carved up too, but it wasn't taken as a colony. Let me explain. Instead, in this area, we have spheres of influence. What a sphere of influence is basically a region where a particular country has exclusive rights over mining, over railroads, over trade, over raw materials. Meaning, for example, in one part where they see the orange in the map there with Britain, Britain had exclusive rights to everything in that land. Basically, you know, just taking whatever they want. Again, Britain, France, Germany, Russia, all of this is, all of these countries are doing this. But notice what country haven't we seen on any of these maps yet? Which country? Yeah, the United States. Does that mean we were innocent? No. No, not at all. In fact, we go ahead and we put through an open door policy. Now, you probably noticed, like I said, the U.S. wasn't on any of the, wasn't in the China trade, wasn't in the Africa, Scramble for Africa. We kind of came late to the party. And so to help make sure we got our cut, Secretary of State John Hay calls for an open door policy. What that means is basically all nations should have equal access to trade and investment in China. Do you think we asked China if that was okay? That we could just say, hey, everyone should have equal trade and take equally from the people of China? No, it's horrible. And again, we were just as bad. In fact, very famously with American imperialism, we have Hawaii. Hawaii is annexed or taken in 1898. And why was Hawaii important? Well, economically, it's a link between the U.S. and the Pacific. That's huge. And militarily, there's great natural harbors to go ahead and, well, house a navy. In fact, very famously, Pearl Harbor is in Hawaii. So the Hawaiians had their, their culture. They had their queen, Lulukalani, who was in charge. So why did the U.S. go ahead and just take this from them? Well, we wanted to be imperialistic too. So we go ahead and we saw that there were gains for us. And so what we do is we take the queen from power and we, buy what they call the Committee of Safety, which, mind you, the Committee of Safety was an all-white group of Hawaiians. The U.S. sends companies of Marines, and the queen had to resign. And William McKinley takes Hawaii in 1898. Again, we took the Queen Lulukalani, out of power forcefully just to take their land. So now that we have Hawaii, as you can see, was huge for trade, and that's the reason why they really went after it, to be honest. Now, do you see any long-term significance of annexing or taking Hawaii, right? I mean, come on. That's huge. It's right in the center of the Pacific Ocean, right? So why can't we just be friends, man? Again, all this fighting for lands for colonies is going to lead to certain crises between these countries. One such crisis is the Spanish-American Crisis. Never heard of it? Well, believe it or not, it isn't that big of a well-known piece of our history. In fact, a lot of times it's grazed over. But essentially, the Spanish-American Crisis is a crisis between the U.S. and Spain, and it didn't take place in the U.S. or Spain. It takes place in Cuba. Well, back then, Spain owned Cuba. Cuba was a colony of Spain, and a very profitable colony, to say the least. In fact, why do you think Spain would want to own Cuba? Again, to kind of look around right here at these pictures, what could possibly come of this? Natural resources, right? That's right. Cuba is known really for two big things. Think imperialism, right? They get all the goodies. Spain gets all the goodies from Cuba. Sugar and cigars. Two big exports from Cuba, even to this day. So many Americans did business with Cuba. Why? Why do you think? Exactly. It's right there. It's strategically located at the entrance of the Gulf of Mexico. It's 90 miles off the coast of the Key West, Florida. It literally is right there. So it's no wonder that, of course, they go ahead and, well, this becomes a big business for Americans. So it almost becomes like a I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine sort of thing. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours sort of thing. Because Cuba sells sugar to the U.S. We love our coffee, we love sugar. So the U.S. had invested $50 million in Cuba's mines, railroads, sugar plantations, to ensure we continue to get that sugar. So we had investments in Cuba, and that's where things start to go a little crazy. Because here we are investing money in a colony that isn't even ours, it's Spain's. Well, let's do a little bit of background first on Cuba. Maybe this will make you understand why each country goes ahead and reacts the way they do. So some quick background info. Spain had owned Cuba for centuries, was making a killing from it, right? Lots of money. And many of the Cubans had been slaves to the Spanish in the past, but now, even though they weren't slaves, they weren't much better off. They were treated horribly. They had very few freedoms and were not able to have their own government. The Cubans wanted to be independent. So Jose Marti, who was an incredible guerrilla, Cuban guerrilla fighting against Spanish authorities, after the Cubans' rebellion collapsed in 1878, which he, tried to go ahead and gain independence then, Jose Marti and other Cubans are going to flee to the U.S., where they kind of regroup and they plan a new revolution. Now, Jose Marti was a writer, in fact, he was a poet, and he wanted to raise awareness of Cuba's problems. Really, there were a lot of problems going on there because of the Spanish. So he hoped to raise money, raise weapons, train an army for the time to come to fight again. And when he does, this whole time the U.S. is neutral. Grover Cleveland is in office, and after Cuba's uprising in 1895, President Grover Cleveland declares the U.S. completely neutral. We want nothing to do with this. But these guys are not neutral. William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer of Pulitzer Prize are yellow journalists. What a yellow journalist is basically the U.S. is going to start to print these daily exaggerated stories about the rebellion in Cuba to attract readers. That was the way for them to go ahead and get readers. They would embellish, right? You ever have that friend who, they're telling the truth, but they're just embellishing on it. They're exaggerating it. They're, what some say, sensationalizing it, making it sound more, in some cases, crazier than it ever was. Again, completely going off the rails in some cases. And so we see this is huge during this era. Yellow journalism, over-exaggerated stories just to get readers. And so what we have here is we have the butcher. General Valeriano Weyler from Spain is sent into Cuba. I mean, look at him. He's evil. He's absolutely... Oh. There we go. That's better. Again, he goes ahead and unfortunately does horrific things. General Weyler goes ahead and herds Cuban villagers into concentration camps, basically so they wouldn't support the rebels. These are villagers. These are civilians. These are people who aren't even, don't have any connections with the rebellion, but they're still being herded up because they didn't, Spain didn't want them to get attracted to the rebellion and become part of it. Again, as crazy as it sounds, we have tens of thousands of Cubans who die in these camps of starvation and disease, and this becomes a huge issue. This is very, very horrible. And so what we have is our new president at the time, William McKinley, go ahead and negotiate with Spain. And he basically says, all right, Spain, let's end this conflict in Cuba. If not, we're going to be getting an open grill. Remember, we have investments in Cuba. We don't want to lose those. And of course, Spain goes, okay, we'll get rid of the butcher. He wasn't a good dude. And we'll give the Cubans their own government. But they still have to be part of the Spanish Empire because we love money. So much money. So they hire Howie Mandel. And he goes, okay, Cuban rebels, deal or no deal? And Jose Marti's like, oh, Howie, this is a tough one. No deal. Viva la Cuba. Whoo, things are getting intense. Things are getting intense now. So the Cuban rebels don't want to accept anything but full independence. The U.S. sees this is getting a little crazy. This is getting a little nutty. We're going to have to go ahead. We're going to get down there. We send the U.S.S. Maine to the coast of Cuba, right in Havana Harbor, just in case things get messy. Just in case things start to get a little crazy. If two sparks could lead to the U.S. declaring war on Spain. First, we have something called the Loan Letter. The Spanish ambassador actually went ahead and criticized President McKinley In fact, it got literally intercepted and, well, was blown up. It was public. What Delhomme, which was said by Enrique de Puy-Delhomme, who was, again, Spanish ambassador, he says that McKinley was weak and bitter for the admiration of the crowd, meaning that he was weak and that he did whatever the people wanted him to do, again, because he just did whatever they wanted, said whatever they wanted. The second is the U.S.S. Maine explodes in Havana Harbor. Oh, this is craziness. Again, you see how this explosion, you have people flying in the air, this is unbelievable. Yellow journalism. It was really like this. This is a real photo. See? Yellow journalism, huh? Taking a little bit of truth and exaggerating it just a little bit. So, the big question on everyone's mind was, who done it? Who done it? Again, American journalists blamed Spain right away for the U.S.S. Maine exploding. And the public was outraged. They demanded war. In fact, they're even going to brush off an old slogan. Again, remember the Alamo. Now is remember the Maine. And after the war, it's confirmed that the U.S.S. Maine actually exploded due to an engine room fire. A piece of coal came out of the coal bin and sparked up. Not bad. However, that was after the war. And in 1898, yes, we declared war on Spain. You guessed it. So now it becomes this big conflict. Your days are numbered, Spain. Tu es muerto. And of course, Spain's all like, lo siento, tío Sam. But we're going to see that the Spanish-American War is going to break out in some intense fighting. Look at this. You've got, oh my goodness, you got this guy, he's like leaning on him. He's like, oh, I got you, friend. He's like, oh, for America. Yellow journalism. Oh, so much yellow journalism. Again, the fighting in Cuba was a little different. We hadn't fought a war since the Civil War. We were using a lot of weapons that were from the Civil War that were just like laying around in storage for decades. In fact, look at how they're dressed. They're dressed as like park rangers. Okay, we weren't even prepared for this war. We're not even wearing helmets. We're wearing hats. Again, we were ill prepared for this war. We were just kind of war hungry, to be honest, as a public. And so when this war begins, we have a couple different campaigns that go down. First, the U.S. Navy goes to the Pacific and takes over the Philippines, which had been part of the Spanish Empire. So we do go ahead and we take over the Philippines out in the Pacific. In Cuba, we have 17,000 troops land on Cuba's mainland. Among these were a volunteer unit called the Rough Riders. There they are. Oh, look at this, somewhat familiar in there. The Rough Riders are a volunteer cavalry unit made up of American cowboys, law officers, miners, and athletes that knew Teddy Roosevelt. As crazy as this sounds, Teddy Roosevelt was Assistant Secretary to the Navy, and he's going to resign in order to fight in this war. And when he does, nice cushy job, right? He goes ahead, resigns, calls up all his friends from college and stuff, and says, "We got a war, guys." And these guys are a volunteer unit, goes down into Cuba with their own horses, their own guns, and everything else, and they fight one of the most famous battles of this war. In fact, what's even more insane is that they lose half their horses on the way down. And of course, the leader of the Rough Riders, Teddy Roosevelt, future president, right there. Remember, this is 1898. This is prior to Roosevelt being president, okay? Roosevelt's not president until 1901. So they're going to assist in the capture of San Juan Hill. Again, very famous battle to capture San Juan Hill, led by Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders. We have a quarter of the total American troops fighting in Cuba were African American. This is a big deal, as again, the last war we had fought was the Civil War, and we were just getting comfortable with allowing African Americans in the military. Here we see that they make up a pretty decent force in this conflict in Cuba. And now Teddy Roosevelt's going to lead those Rough Riders with his close friend Leonard Wood. We are going to start to occupy the Spanish territory of Puerto Rico, and of course, as you know, to this day, they become one of our territories. And in August 12, 1898, Spain and the U.S. agreed to a ceasefire. So for those keeping track, that was altogether 4 months. And we won. So what did we gain? After this war, we got Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and Guam, which is an island out in the Pacific as well. And you haven't seen the last of this guy. Wait till he becomes president. But now the American Empire is, right? We have just gained land, more land. And what do we do with this newly acquired land? Now, Cuba is given their independence as promised. Again, the Teller Amendment was made where we promised we would give, during this war, that we would go ahead and we'd give them their freedom if we win. The U.S. is going to annex or take Guam and Puerto Rico. They're going to become our territories, and they're going to continue to be territories all the way up till present day. But what do we do about the Philippines? Do we remain true to our Republican ideals and let them be free, let them have their own independence, or do we become an imperial power and we capture them? Well, there's reasons for it. Again, the economic and military benefits of having the Philippines are huge. First, it gives us another naval base in Asia. It would give us a large market to sell our goods. And of course, the horrible belief that, again, they believed back then that we had a moral duty to teach less civilized peoples how to live properly. So, even to give you an idea of what a New England minister, to give you an idea of what even people from our area were thinking, that's, and I quote, "Surely the Spanish War has not been a grab for empire, but a heroic effort to free the oppressed and to teach millions of ignorant, debased human beings thus freed how to live." Again, they knew how to live way before we were there, okay? Again, we are unfortunately going to be trying to stamp out their culture, again, spreading democracy, spreading Christianity, unfortunately. Now, there's a bunch of reasons to not take the Philippines too, right? You have a lot of anti-imperialists that said that the cost of an empire far outweighed the economic benefits provided. Again, if you do go ahead and take a colony or a territory, you still have to support that colony and territory. That's a lot of money, a lot of resources. Cheap labor could actually drive down U.S. wages. Again, a lot of outsourcing could happen. And imperialism violated our American principles. We are a country who once was a colony and fought for our independence. Why would we take other colonies? That just seems, well, not right. In the end, President McKinley says yes, and we will take the Philippines. So, to give you an idea, Treaty of Paris is what gets signed. U.S. and Spain sign this together. Cuba becomes independent, and we acquire Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines for $20 million. Now, why do you think we paid $20 million for all this land that we won? We won the war. Why should we pay? You got it. It helps keep it, very nice between the two countries. Kind of as like a little bit of, peacekeeping, if you will, where we go, okay, hey, no hard feelings, just 20 million. Here you go. So it kind of helps that a little bit. Now we are officially an imperial power, and we are just as bad as the British were with getting colonies in France and Germany and all that at that time. How is that going to shape and change the world? Well, we'll talk about that in our next vlog. Again, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you back in the classroom.